So we're going live on YouTube now. So we're going live on YouTube now. Okay, we're live on YouTube. And let me go live in Zoom. Okay. And we should have a whole pile of people just pouring in right now. And while people are coming in, we're going to have Marjon Savelsberg from the Netherlands, who's an Eagle Owl vocal expert, entertain us with some Eurasian Eagle Owl calls. Take it away, Marjon.
Okay, so, this is always weird to hoot at your computer. But anyway, so I've been thinking about a few things. So Eurasian eagle owls can be identified by their territorial call. So I thought to give you several male territorial calls that I have in my research area. So we have ooh, ooh. That's number one. And we have ooh, ooh. That was male number two. And we have male number three. He does ooh, ooh. So it's easy, right? What shall we else do? Female call. So the females are a little bit more higher in frequency. It's like ooh, ooh. And men, so human men, when they hear this, tell me, oh yeah, it's a female. They sound a bit whiny. But I'm not sure if the owls see it that way. Eurasian eagle owl females this time of year, so the male has to prove itself that he's a good provider. So they will just sit on their perch, and they will beg or do a contact call. That's a bit like and they won't stop until the male brings food. And when the male brings food, he's usually a bit excited, and he will fly in and he will do and he will try to give her food, and he will do clucky chitters. So that's a very soft vocalization that you see in Eurasian eagle owls when they transfer food to each other or when they are active at the nest site. And of course, I'm not an eagle owl, but I've been practicing this in my bathroom this morning. Not sure if I still remember, but here we go. Clucky chitters. So that's clucky chitters. What else do we have?
Was that the male or the female clucky chitters?
But that's a good one. I was glad I got one out.
Because Uhu, our captive female, does more of kind of a
yeah. There's a little rhythm difference between the male and the female. Yeah, true, correct. So this would have been the male then. And then we have what else do we have, Carla? Any idea?
Well, you have to do a copulation sequence.
Oh, yes, but I'm just by myself. So to do a copulation sequence by myself is a little bit of a challenge, but well, the male is calling. So the female is sitting there, the male is calling, ooh, ooh, ooh. And if he's lucky, she will say, ooh. So then you get ooh, ooh, ooh. And sometimes when he gets really excited, he does ooh, ooh. Ooh, ooh. So he has a little pickup note, ooh, 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 and then he flies in and he does ooh, 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 staccato hoots. So they're excited, and she does the same thing at the same time. So it's a little bit higher. It's the ooh, 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 and then that's the moment where the male jumps on top of the back of the female. And then the female will do a very high-pitched chitter, which I can't do because I'm not a female owl. I'm sorry. But the male will do a copulation squeal at that time. Bear in mind, I'm not a male eagle owl also, but it sounds a bit like. And then he will take off, and he will still do a little bit of ooh, and ooh, ooh, ooh. that's basically it.
Yes, and Zoom didn't want anybody to hear the copulation squeal. So for those of you who are watching, Zoom is the nemesis of us when we're doing owl calls. Anything high-pitched and loud, it just filters out and won't let come through. So it's a high-pitched kind of a squealing sound that the male does.
And then there's the devil's cackles. So that's considered to be an alarm call, but it's also given when they are declaring the territory and telling young owls to move away. And the male do them quite subdued. It's like whack, 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 whack. And people here say it's a duck calling. It's not a duck, it's Eurasian eagle owl. And the females sound a lot more harsh, but probably that will skip also in Zoom. It's whack, 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 whack. Whack, 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 whack. And sometimes they slur it like whack, 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 whack. So that was it.
And those can be freaky because when they're really, really loud.
They're fun.
Thank you, Marjon, for entertaining us while everybody's coming into the session.
You're welcome.
Okay. We will get started now. So thank you, everybody who's joining us to get a wider view of what happened around Flaco, the Eurasian eagle owl, who was vandal set loose from the Central Park Zoo in New York City exactly 2 years ago. Today is the anniversary of that. And he died about 1 year later. Also, thank you to everybody that opted to make a donation to support this series, to cover our webinar license and time to do this. That helps us keep it free so everybody that wants to learn can learn, because we do have people tuning in from literally all over the world. We have people registered from every continent except Antarctica. And some of these countries have a very different exchange rate than the United States. So the donations are what allow us to make it so everybody can learn for free. So that's very appreciated. This is going to be saved on the International Owl Center's YouTube channel. So if there's somebody that couldn't make it and wants to see it, or you want to share it with somebody else later, you can find it on the Owl Center's YouTube channel. And for those of you who have never heard of the International Owl Center before, we're in the sprawling metropolis of Houston, Minnesota, less than 1,000 people, way down in the toe of Minnesota. So we just sort of evolved here. We never intended to be here. So anyway, we have a physical facility. We're working on building a new center. That's what it should be. But one of the ways we reach the whole world is through this webinar series. And with us, we have, I'm going to start with Marjon Savelsberg, who just did our all of our eagle owl calls. She started out as a volunteer for the Owl Center in our research project studying great horned owl vocalizations. We were live streaming a pair of great horned owls and asking people to help report what they were hearing. And Marjon took that and ran with it as a trained musician and spun off doing her own Eurasian eagle owl research in the Netherlands. So now she is probably the world authority on Eurasian eagle owl vocalizations and behavior. So we're happy to have her here. We also have Lisa Owens-Viani joining us from California. And Lisa has been here also. She was one of our World Owl Hall of Fame award winners a few years back for her fantastic work trying to get rodenticides more strictly regulated because of their impacts on owls and other wildlife. And new to us and haven't been to the Owl Center yet, you have to come. David Lay and Jackie Emery from New York City, who have followed Flaco, I mean, pretty much daily for the whole time that he was out. And then last but not least, Joe Severson, one of our educators here from the Owl Center, and Joe's going to be helping out with questions at the end. So a little housekeeping of how this is going to run. The chat is off in Zoom. So if you have questions, just put them in the Q&A and we'll address those at the end of all three presentations. If you are joining us in YouTube, and I should also give a special shout out to all of our chat room moderators that are joining us in YouTube, who are helping with things there. The chat is on there. Please keep it on topic to what we're discussing here. Our chat room moderators will be there to help you. And our special guest moderator is Owly Keep, who's Tristan Williams from the Scottish Owl Center, who has worked with over 40 different species of owls. So he can answer some questions directly in YouTube chat. And questions that are posed in YouTube chat will be filtered by the chat room moderators over to us. So when we get into the Q&A session, those can be answered also. And with the number of people that are joining us, there's a good likelihood we won't get through all of the questions, but we'll devote up to 2 hours from now is when we're going to end. So that's when we'll cut off the questions at that time. And yeah, we won't take them specifically in order. We'll be jumping around to make sure we cover a bunch of different topics, grouping together similar questions, things like that. So Joe and I will take turns asking the panelists the questions that you pose to them at the end. We're going to be going in the order of David and Jackie first, giving us the view of Flaco's life and what happened to him. Then Marjon will come in and talk about how Marjon will talk about all kinds of things pertaining to Eurasian eagle owls in the Netherlands and also how things relate to Flaco himself. And then Lisa will wrap up talking about the rodenticides and those impacts on him. And then we'll switch over to the questions. So let's start with David and Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie.
And I'm David.
And we are part-time professional wildlife photographers and authors of Finding Flaco, Our Year with New York City's Beloved Owl. Did you do the audio? Right. Last year, on February 2nd, we celebrated Flaco's Year of Freedom. Today, we are here to share with you some of what we learned about Flaco while photographing him and by writing our book. The story of Flaco begins in a bird park in Scotland Neck, North Carolina, where he hatched on March 15th, 2010. When Flaco was 2 months old, he was transferred to the Central Park Zoo. He lived in the zoo for nearly 13 years until the fateful night of February 2nd, 2023, when a vandal cut the wire mesh of his enclosure and released him. So here are the two photos of Flaco's enclosures at the zoo. On the left, you have his first enclosure. On the right, his second enclosure. You can see the mesh at the top, which was cut 2 years ago by a vandal whose identity and motive remains unknown to this day. Once released, Flaco managed to safely fly over 3 lanes of New York City traffic, despite having limited flight skills, and he landed on the sidewalk near 5th Avenue and 60th Street. Here you see him looking bewildered and scared. Notice how alert he looks with his eyes wide open and his ear tufts erect. He was also likely tired from the exertion of flying. You can also see that a crowd formed around him very quickly. The police responded and placed a small pet carrier on the sidewalk. Flaco was not cooperative with this first rudimentary rescue attempt, previewing his future resistance to being captured. He soon flew to a tree outside the iconic Plaza Hotel, where he spent the rest of the night.
So the morning after his release, Flaco flew a short distance back into Central Park and landed in the tallest tree in Hallett Sanctuary, a wooded area. The buildings in the background of this photo are luxury apartments on Central Park South. It was an odd place for him to roost, not only because of that, but also because he was highly exposed to mobbing hawks, crows, and blue jays. And that's because he honestly didn't know that he was supposed to conceal himself during the day yet. Workers from the Wildlife Conservation Society, which operates the Central Park Zoo, began a very large operation to rescue him. We were all very concerned and hoped Flaco would be rescued soon, but we learned he had just been fed before his release, so he was not immediately responsive to bait. Flaco found lower perches and hunkered down in Hallett. After a few days, he surprisingly flew a few hundred feet east back to the edge of the Central Park Zoo, and we wondered if he was looking for the comfort of home. He was evidently just exploring. For the next few days, and this is the photo of him at the zoo, at the edge of the zoo. For the next few days, we watched Flaco become more owly, roosting during the day and practicing his flight at night while the rescuers looked on. He initially had poor flight skills. He crashed into branches and twigs every time he landed, and he was only able to go short distances with long breaks in between. One night, and this is the photo, Flaco suddenly perked up, swooped over our heads, and hit the ground behind us. He was trying to hunt for the first time, we think. He was presumably getting quite hungry, and we wondered if he was finally going to be interested in the baited traps laid out for him. And he was. This photo was taken a week after Flaco's release. After flying out that night, Flaco made his way to a meadow where a number of baited traps were set and flew to one of them. He briefly made contact with it, became alarmed, and then landed next to the trap before taking off. This was the closest he ever came to being caught. That night, I went to the park and found Flaco. That night, I went to the park and found Flaco on the ground in an enclosed meadow teeming with rats. He was watching the rats scurry by. You can see the shape of one in the foreground of this photo. Every so often, he tried to chase a rat or pounce on it from a short distance. And after several tries, Flaco was successful. I was amazed, and more than a little proud, to see Flaco pick up this huge Norway rat in his beak. Once he had this breakthrough moment, Flaco quickly became a proficient hunter. The prospects of recapturing him were low because he was no longer responsive to bait. By 2 weeks after his release, Flaco had transformed himself into a wild bird. The Wildlife Conservation Society decided to end their rescue and allow Flaco to remain free. Almost as if he knew, Flaco settled into Central Park very quickly and started looking like he owned the place. This photo, which is on the cover of our book, shows Flaco perched on the Naumburg bandshell, a Central Park landmark. It was taken the night Flaco officially became a free bird, and it was also our first, but certainly not the last time seeing him on a building. And here he is perched on a concrete pipe next to a Central Park Conservancy sign. Flaco also occasionally used one of Central Park's most cherished and iconic amenities, its park benches. I took this photo on a very windy night when Flaco was hunting from low perches. We would now like to tell you about some of Flaco's favorite places in Central Park.
So he soon settled into the northern section of the park. He roosted in the North Woods and the Loch beginning February 20th. This is in the photo on the left, you see him basking in the sunshine in one of his favorite trees that is located near a waterfall. It was very peaceful. You also notice the white on the bark. That's whitewash. That's owl poop. And the photo on the right shows him just starting to do his pre-flyout routine. At night, he would hunt in the construction site of the Harlem Mere. The machinery and tall dirt mounds made the area perfect hunting grounds for Flaco. He became a bit of a legend there, so much so that construction workers hung photos of him in one of their trailers at the site, as Ed Shanahan reported in his New York Times piece for Flaco's one-year anniversary as a wild owl. In the photo on the left, he's perching on a concrete wall form. In the photo on the right, he's perching on a safety railing, the safety railing of the roof of the building next to an American flag. He also loved Komatsu excavators. We would joke that boys loved their toys. Like the construction site, the park's composting area was one of Flaco's favorite spots. He perched on the machines for composting. In the photo on the left, he's on another excavator with the lights of Fifth Avenue buildings in the background. On the photo on the right, he's on another machine. The composting area is also a trash dump with several dumpsters that attract lots of critters, including squirrels, raccoons, the occasional feral cat, and of course, rats. In this photo, he's using a composting mound as his dining table. The large rodent population in the composting area made it a favored spot for the snowy owl that visited Central Park in the winter of 2021. In these photos, you see Flaco and the snowy owl perching in the same tree with the same Fifth Avenue building in the background. Flaco and Snowy and other owls have dined on the rodent buffet at Compost, which we think is a relatively safe place for owls to hunt, given that the rats foraging there at night are likely to live there as well, far away from the rodenticides used outside the park. The Central Park coyote or coyotes. Now we have two, also like to hunt in compost. And so one night we were with Flaco and suddenly this coyote appeared, and that was quite special.
Flaco is very interested in the coyote. These two photos are from the same moment. One of our favorite places to see Flaco was a big, beautiful American elm. And here's a video of him preening in the early evening, the elm. So this tree had a lovely leafy canopy that sheltered him from the elements and from the attention of mobbing birds. But there was conveniently a big gap where the sunlight would shine through, and he was just gorgeous in that light. You can see that as he kind of looked from light to dark, his the dilation of his pupils change. Just kind of fun. It just happened right there. Go around.
Reaching his preening gland.
Oh, there's a fair bit of this, so I'll move on. He also loved to hoot, including from this tree. And Marjon will talk more about his hoots later. But usually he'd hoot at night. But this time he started hooting during the day. He'd do it in response sometimes to police sirens, to people cheering on the nearby baseball fields. The little clicks you can hear in the background are actually from pickleball courts a short distance away. So, he was really living in the middle of the park amidst all these different activities. And then here's a favorite moment we had with Flaco. He would often roost where he planned to hunt. And one of our friends joked that, like all New Yorkers, he's looking for a short commute to work. But here he is right below his elm tree, looking for a rat that he'd catch from a night before. And something that owls do is cache prey for future eating. But it seems like he might have forgotten exactly where he hid it. So he's kind of looking around to remember where that rat might be. It's amazing how sweet and innocent he looks, and yet mischievous in some way. And we always love to see him use his big furry legs. Oh, yep. You can almost see the thought bubble above his head. Where did I leave that rat? And then, of course, going for a little jog. Just super cute. And of course, we could see all this because this happened in Central Park, a fairly well illuminated place, even at night. So all these clips were illuminated just by street light. And of course, Eurasian Eagle Owls might be doing this in their native ranges, but because he happened to be doing this in the middle of New York City on full display for us, we were able to see it. Oh, Flaco often hunted in the baseball fields neighboring the elm. He would perch on the backstops of the baseball fields to scan for prey. In the photo on the left, the lights in the background are from apartment buildings of the Upper West Side. And in the photo on the right, the blue beam in the background is the 9/11 tribute in light, which you could see from Central Park. Flaco often hunted in the baseball, Flaco also spent a lot of time in the baseball fields themselves. We joked that he was in his own baseball team and tried to play every position. The photo on the bottom right is really neat. One night we saw Flaco spread his wings out and take a dust bath in the sand. During the last couple of months of his residency in Central Park, Flaco often roosted in an oak tree at the intersection of two roadways that were always busy with pedestrians and cyclists. A lot of people got to see him there. When he flew out from that roost at night, he would typically fly over one of the roadways, giving us very clear views. In early November, Flaco disappeared from Central Park altogether. And, just reading from my notes here. In his last month residing in Central Park, Flaco often disappeared to the east, and we later figured out that he was exploring the Upper East Side. By early November, he disappeared from Central Park altogether, and we found him a week later, several miles south in the East Village. Here he is in a small community garden playing peekaboo with a squirrel. We were alarmed he left the park and worried about all the hazards he would face in the city, especially secondary rodenticide poisoning. But he seemed fine, and we speculated that Flaco was exploring, possibly looking for a mate. While Flaco was downtown, he also visited the Lower East Side and spent a couple of nights hooting from the tops of 20-story buildings. This behavior seemed consistent with the theory that he was expanding his territory and looking for a mate. But Flaco didn't stay downtown for long. He soon returned uptown.
So Flaco moved to the Upper West Side at the end of November 2023. He roosted in private courtyards during this time. Sometimes we were lucky and were invited over to visit him. Here he is roosting on scaffolding outside a friend's apartment. This wider shot gives you a sense of how at ease Flaco was inside courtyards. Here he is doing his pre-fly out routine, often referred to as the DeLorean. On a rainy day, he did what I like to call his shaky shake while preening. Capturing that moment made me very happy. Most of our sightings of him were at night. We would drive what we called the hoot route, listening and looking for him on buildings and water towers where he liked to hoot. We would begin at the Beresford on Central Park West between 81st and 82nd Streets. It's a 20-story landmark building across the street from the Museum of Natural History and Central Park. On 241, he also would hoot on 241 Central Park West. The creamsicle colored columns are thought to resemble corn stalks or tulips. I prefer tulips. It was interesting how often Flaco would choose to perch on orange human-made objects that complemented his eyes and plumage. One of our most memorable moments with Flaco was on Christmas Eve 2023. David took this photo from a rooftop where we watched Flaco for quite some time before he flew off into Central Park to hunt. It was a very special evening. And here are two photos taken 1 year ago today of Flaco peering into an apartment building. They were watching television and he seemed interested in whatever show was on. He was nicknamed a peeping Tom in the press during this time for his window peeping behavior. This behavior resulted from a life of captivity that conditioned him to being comfortable around humans. He might have been interested in what was on TV, but we also observed him hunting for pigeons on ledges that evening.
Well, we first saw Flaco hunting pigeons about 10 months after his release. In our minds, this was another explanation of why he'd left Central Park, because he found a new food source. We were encouraged by this development because we thought pigeons were safer for him than rats in the city. I took this photo the last night we saw Flaco, more than a year after his release. That night began with us on our friend Paul's roof, watching and listening to Flaco hoot on a water tower across the street. He was clutching a pigeon in his talons. Before long, Flaco flew to a chimney structure right over us and continued hooting. You can see the pigeon in this photo right under him. This went on for a while before Flaco flew to a different building to eat his catch.
Let it go to the end.
So that's steam or exhaust billowing from one of the buildings. So this proved to be the very last time we'd see him. Flaco was not seen or heard again the following days. We looked for him extensively and became more and more worried. About a week later, our worst fears were realized. Flaco was found dead in a courtyard where he had frequently roosted. A necropsy subsequently conducted by the Wildlife Conservation Society determined that Flaco had contracted severe pigeon's herpesvirus, a disease fatal for Eurasian eagle owls. He also had potentially lethal levels of secondary rodenticide poisoning in his system. The outpouring of grief was immediate. A large memorial formed around his oak tree, and a memorial service conducted later attracted several hundred people, demonstrating how Flaco had meant so much to so many.
After his passing, legislation was named or renamed in Flaco's honor. At the state level, the Bird Safe Buildings Act was renamed Feathered Lives Also Count Flaco Act. At the city level, 3 pieces of legislation called Flaco's Laws have been introduced. And Flaco's Law number 1 was passed unanimously by the New York City Council in September of this year. We hope that Flaco's legacy will make New York a safer place for every bird that calls it home. He inspired many people to pay attention, perhaps for the first time, to what it means to be a wild animal in an urban environment, and he will forever be an ambassador for urban wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We summarized Flaco's story as best as we could for this presentation. If you're interested in reading the full story and owning the book, I'm pleased to report that it's listed on the International Owl Center store's website with shipping beginning the coming week.
Thank you very much, David and Jackie. And if you want to stop sharing, then we will turn it over to Marjon.
Let me share the screen with you. So this should be it. Let me check. Here we go. So hi everybody. So my name is Marjon. I am a bioacoustic researcher in the Netherlands. Sounds wonderful, but it means that I record and analyze Eurasian eagle owl calls, and I observe Eurasian eagle owls a lot to see the associated behaviors, because you cannot say anything about calls if you don't know what they mean without knowing their behavior. So well, when it happened that Flaco escaped, I'm not exactly sure how I heard it. I'm not sure if I saw it online and let Carla know, or if Carla let me know, and no idea, but I became very interested because, of course, a Eurasian eagle owl flying in that big of a city was quite interesting to me. And I became, well, you saw the pictures. I mean, you cannot not love that owl because of the look on his face that he has. So now I want to tell you a little bit about, well, people ask me, do you think he will survive, or is it weird that he survived a year? Well, 2 answers, yes. It is a bit astonishing that he survived a year, but also, no, it's perfectly reasonable that he survived a year, because his counterparts, his family members over here do the same thing. And that's what I was going to show you a little bit. So this is Maastricht. This is the city where I live. It's considered a large city for my country. It has 120,000 people, which is nothing compared to New York, of course. And in the oval-shaped red circle, there's a quarry. It's a limestone quarry. And in that quarry, I do my research. And I used to have 3 pairs of Eurasian eagle owls living there. Nowadays, it's only 2 pairs, but nevertheless. It's a top predator, but a very rare predator. It used to be a very rare predator in this area. It was extinct for almost a century and came back in 1996. This was the first area in the Netherlands where they were found. And the province declared this a top priority species, so they want to know everything about the animals. And they did a research in which they had people put transmitters on the owls to see where they would go at night. And we found this. So this is, again, my town, but then zoomed in a little bit. The red circle is the quarry. Of course, you will find the owls foraging there and sitting there. But what we also see is that they are up there. That's the cemetery, and Maastricht has quite a large cemetery, and cemetery means trees, grass, critters running around, so there's food. Another part is this, where you see more of the pink. So the pink is the positions where the owls were seen with GPS. That's the city park. Makes sense. There's a little river going through town. So there's waterfowl. In the park, you go for a picnic. You leave your leftovers there. So there's rats, there's pigeons, there's crows. So basically, there's enough food. And there's this little thing in the right bottom corner. And that was a bit funny. That's, how do you call it? It's a scrap heap or a graveyard for old cars. So you have huge amounts and mountains of piles of cars. And of course, there's rats living there. So also good food stores for Eurasian eagle owls. So they do hunt in town close to people because people mean food. So originally, our population comes from an area like this. It's called the German Eifel. In Germany, the numbers went down dramatically in the 1900s, and also in the Netherlands, they were completely gone. So in Germany, they started a reintroduction program, and they were very successful. So the owls were brought to the German Eifel, which is a rocky area, and it's adjacent to my province. And when things were going well there and the population was expanding, the owls found my area. And if you are an owl born here in these slopes, rocky slopes, then, and you find this, my quarry, well, not my quarry, but the quarry, you can see why they chose to stay here. You have these steep rock walls. It's a bit hard to see, but they are about 40 meters high. 40 meters, that's about 130 feet high, I think. And there's a factory there. And as you can see in David and Jackie's presentation also, owls like to perch on buildings. And because if you are on a tall building, your hoot will go really far. So all your neighbors will hear where you are. So they also use the factory to sit on and call. Also, what you have there are many nooks and little ledges. And just like Flaco sat on air conditioning units, like a little ledge, you can see in the first picture a female watching over her young. So you can see the young at the bottom of the picture. There's 3 of them. The middle picture is a nesting female. They choose these little nooks that you can hardly see. And you can see that it's a female owl because you see these little plumicorns or ear tufts sticking up. She's nesting there, and well, the perfect way to find them is to use a spotting scope. And whenever I see plumicorns, I make a sound, and I know these females are so curious that when they hear me, I know they will peek with a big orange eye, and that's when I know it's an owl and not 2 twigs. And this is actually a very smart place for her to nest, because once she has owlets, there will be leaves in the bushes in front of her nest, so she will be completely invisible. And the last one, that's also a 130-yard high or 40 meters high quarry wall. And colleagues excavated this nook in there for the owls to nest in. And since this is there, she's always nesting in this spot. So, of course, it's totally different than New York, but as you can see, they like to sit up high, just like Flaco chose his little places to sit on. So perfectly natural behavior. So in the Netherlands, we have escaped or released owls also. We have, I mean, you can go on eBay or something like eBay. This is a picture of a website I took. And you can buy a Eurasian Eagle Owl for €150. And that's actually, I've seen them much cheaper than that. It's legal to have them as a pet over here. But of course, owls do not make good pets because owls, well, they are very loud at night. They have pallets. They have almost 2-inch long talons. That's not good for your furniture or your floor. They poop everywhere. They are not vegetarians. So people who apparently thought, oh, that's cute, owls are so cute, realize, oh, it's not the best pet, so let's give it back to nature. So they will release it, or owls escape. And this morning I did a search on internet. I gave in missing eagle owl, and this is a little bit of the pictures that all popped up. So we have a working group in the Netherlands. That's the Eagle Owl working group. And they keep track of a lot of things that go on with Eurasian Eagle Owls. And they kept track of all the missing birds, or when somebody saw a bird fly that wasn't a wild one. And you can often tell because they are still wearing their jesses, or even a leash attached to the jesses. Or they have a different band than a wild owl has, so a breeder's band. You can recognize that, and you could report it to the Eagle Owl working group, but they somehow stopped keeping track of it because there were so many that it was just undoable to track everything. So I've read that they think that about 30 to 35 eagle owls or related to eagle owls escape every year in the Netherlands. Some are, of course, found back, but others are not. And the issue is with escaped owls that were pets is that they can be human imprints. So they have all their owl instincts, but they think they're humans. So they're not afraid of humans. As a matter of fact, humans also mean food. And then you get situations like we had several years ago with this owl. They named it the cuddle owl, and I show you why.
Rustig blijven. Rustig blijven, Janne.
So you can hear all the clicking of the photographers. This was a big hit in the Netherlands. This was close to a churchyard, and the owl would also go into the churchyard. And the minister of the church was, well, Dutch, so we want to make money. He put a sign outside that if you paid €1, you could go into the churchyard and you could cuddle with the cuddle owl. But what this owl was doing was not just cuddling, it was copulating with people's heads. And you can imagine, to have these talons on your head, it's not a pleasant thing to happen. So also in that time frame, I think a little bit earlier, we had another owl and it made headlines worldwide. So here you go. The Independent, The Guardian, BBC News. And we had our terror Uhu. Uhu is Dutch for eagle owl, so terror owl. And this owl also escaped. And what he did was, in a few months' time, he attacked at least 50 people. And 20 of those people had to go to the hospital for stitches. So it was quite dangerous to walk around there. People walked around with umbrellas to stay safe from the owl. And the owl was caught and is still in a zoo right now because it was, well, not doable to have him live free because it was too dangerous. So again, not always fun to have owls fly free. And then we have this one. So this was not a human imprint. And this is a webcam project that our BirdLife in the Netherlands has. So every year you can look into birds' nests. And this year in 21, there was an eagle owl's nest. It's in a barn, It's a man-made nest, but the wild female has adopted it as her nest. And she has a male, and the male is bringing her a rabbit in this picture. Looks perfectly fine to Eurasian eagle owls until you take a closer look and you see this leg band. So that's not a leg band that owls get from the National Banding Station. Those are much bigger and much wider. This is a breeder's band, so the breeder has to put it over the owlets when the owl is still a little owlet over the leg. So you can only do that until they are about, I think, 3 weeks, right, Carla? Well, I'll ask Carla, 2 to 3 weeks. And afterwards you cannot. So you always know that this is not a wild owl. And then when we saw daylight pictures, we knew it wasn't a wild owl because it's much lighter than the nominate species that we have flying around here in the Netherlands. Sad story for this mom and dad with 3 owlets. Both the adults disappeared. I've heard stories that they were shot, but I don't think that was ever really established. Could be a rumor. I don't know what happened. So the 3 owlets were taken into rehab. And it's not just Eurasian eagle owls that fly around. So America had a Eurasian eagle owl flying around as a not native species. I got this audio from a man who said, "Hey, listen, I have an owl sitting on my chimney and I think it's an eagle owl, but I'm not sure." Since I'm so involved in Carla Bloom's vocalization research on great horned owls, I immediately know that this was not a Eurasian eagle owl, but it was a great horned owl. As a matter of fact, it was a male. And what this male did was it started going towards our Eurasian eagle owl population. So I had him in my quarry, hooting up a storm. And he ended up in a different quarry also. So apparently he got attracted by the hooting owls. And we thought, well, we know that there has been a case of crossbreeding in a zoo in England. I think it was in Dudley Zoo in 1951. And that was successful. So Eurasian eagle owls can apparently breed with great horned owls. And at that point, we decided with a couple of people and the province that it needed to be caught and taken out of the province. And at the time that we got that decision, sadly, it wasn't needed anymore because the owl close to a quarry flew into barbed wire and had to be euthanized. And this is just a week ago. This is a spotted eagle owl. He's flying around about 15 miles from my place. And as you can see, well, it was first seen last Saturday. So Saturday a week ago, and this is a picture taken 24 hours later. So you can see he produced a pellet. So apparently this owl is capable of hunting for himself. I'm not sure what we're going to do with this little guy. I think we're still debating that, but we'll see. So lots of issues with escaped owls here. That was just one of the things I wanted to say. And people always said, what can you tell us about Flaco's hoots? Do you know what he's telling us? Well, I don't know. I don't have Google Translate for Eurasian eagle owls, but I can tell you which sound they make in which certain circumstances. So what you see here is what wild Eurasian eagle owls do. If you go from roughly end of summer until December, that's the first main call period of Eurasian eagle owls. That's when they tell everybody, this is my territory, get out. And this is a male hooting, and you can see it's an evenly spaced call that repeats itself. There's also a badger chittering. So these hoods are given from high perches, or as Flaco did, trees or tall buildings, and they can go on for a very long period of time. I've had one female hood for 57 minutes on end last autumn. She did 229 hoods in that time period. They can go on for long periods, and they change perches in the territory. So perfectly normal behavior. And the second period of main period of hooding is about end of December until egg laying. So that's in my area around March. And then they will still hoot a lot, but they will hoot at each other. So it's not aimed at the neighbors, it's aimed at each other. And you can tell there's a little bit of a difference in the hoot. So what I saw from Flaco's hoots, and I didn't get much material, but that was pure territorial hooting, makes sense also because he didn't have a female, of course. So that's about his hoot. Oh, that's Flaco. I forgot about that. Again, evenly spaced, similar calls. And I see I made a typo in Jacqueline's name. My apologies. So, are you surprised, Marjon, that he made it for a full year? No, because his cousins, his family over here does that too. They live in cities. They face all kinds of dangers, but they live here. And also when they escape, they can even have owlets. So no, I wasn't surprised. But yes, I'm surprised that he made it another year, because owls face many dangers, not just Flaco, but his relatives over here face a lot of dangers. Oh, you saw the picture that I had a warning about that owl. So this is the, oh, sorry. This is the slide with the not so fun pictures. The first picture, you see all these feathers is caused by probably most likely an invasive species. We have raccoons over here, so they're brought in by humans into Europe, and they are doing very well here. So they ate a lot of Eurasian eagle owls, something that humans are to blame for. Also something that humans are trying to contain, because we have to catch them. And there's a law now that we need to catch them and euthanize them, because they are very bad for our wildlife. So another thing that humans do unknowingly, recreation in Eurasian eagle owl territory. So the picture of these tiny little babies, recently hatched owlets, is in a quarry, an abandoned quarry where illegal motocross races are being held. And a friend of mine studied the owls there, and he found this, and he saw motor tracks running up to the nest. And he thinks that the female was flushed out of the nest, and in her panic, kicked the young out of the nest, and they were too tiny to crawl back. And the females do come back to the nest, but Eurasian eagle owl females tend to come back once the sun has gone down. And of course, that's too late for these tiny young, and they sadly died. On the other hand, caused by humans, but we can help owls to save them from recreation and things like this by finding the nests and protecting the area. And that's one of the things we do. We have the rodenticides, and Lisa is absolutely going to tell more about that. I need to really step on it now. So one thing I need to say, we had a pest controller that worked for the city. His name was Fred Verseide. Well, if you had a rodent problem in your house, he would come, he would put rodenticides in your house, and he would go and said, problem solved. He became a Buddhist, and he learned that Eurasian eagle owls catch those rodents, feed them to their young, and kill the young. So that's when he decided we need to stop using rodenticides. And instead of going to people to use rodenticides, he went to people and explained to them how they could rodent-proof their house and how they could behave so the rodents wouldn't be a problem anymore. And he has been doing that. He banned rodenticides for people in town. He didn't use it anymore. And we saw that the number of owls, of raptors, and also foxes in town went up, and rodent population started to go down. So he did awesome work. And by now it's a law in the Netherlands that people like me who just live in houses and do not have a large company, we cannot buy rodenticides anymore in supermarkets or hardware stores. So it's illegal to sell it to the general public. So eagle owls die of diseases. We have polluted soil. Lots of dangers going on. The pollution gets into the prey and the owl eats the prey and dies from it. The collisions, also, that's one of the reasons that I thought, how on earth did Flaco do that? Survive the crowded city of New York. And we have the barbed wire. And that's the last picture. Barbed wire is horrible for wildlife, and owls fly into it, and this is the result. And often they have to be euthanized because they are so damaged. And again, we can do something about this. So we can take the barbed wire away. Around the quarry where I do my research, the barbed wire has been removed and replaced by something else. And also in the province, we are starting to, and it's also good for wildlife, for other wildlife, we are starting to put in, how do we say that, blackthorn and hawthorn hedges. So that helps wildlife. So do we need to be depressed after all this? No, because with all the challenges, these owls are doing good in my country. They went up from 1 pair in 1997 to 108 territories right now. And I thought, on a very bright note, this is why we study them. 3 young flacos in a nest. And I thank you very much, and I apologize for being over my time by a few minutes.
Thank you, Marjon. All right, Lisa, we'll turn it over to you to follow up right where Marjon left off.
Okay, can everyone see my screen? Thank you so much for having me here today. So I'm going to be sort of the downer part of the presentation, I think, but I want to tell you about rat poison and what it's doing to wildlife. And so I always pose this question at the beginning of my talks. Are anticoagulant rodenticides our new DDT in the sense that they are infiltrating the entire food web? I founded Raptors Are the Solution 13 years ago with raptor biologist Alan Fish, and we are a project of Earth Island Institute in Berkeley, California. Our mission is that we envision a healthy, functioning food web in which every organism remains poison-free. Rat poisons undermine a critical piece of this system, the predator-prey relationship. They also affect the health of both individual animals and entire ecosystems. Only 30 to 50% of raptors survive their first year. As Marjon pointed out, they're vulnerable to disease, insecticides, window and vehicle collisions. People still shoot and trap them, barbed wire, razor wire, electrocution from power lines, and even green energy, wind power and solar power can take a toll on raptors. But one of those threats is something we can do something about right now, and that is rat poison. Right now, rodenticides currently fall into 3 categories. This is generally, I'm speaking for the US, but I think it's pretty much the same for other countries. First generation anticoagulants, second generation anticoagulants, non-anticoagulant rodenticides like bromethalin, which is a nerve toxin, cholecalciferol, which is a vitamin D3 overdose, and zinc phosphide. So all of these poisons are hazardous for wildlife. The bromethalin, there is no antidote if a pet eats it. Cholecalciferol can also cause very terrible deaths to pets and wildlife. And bromethalin has been found in San Francisco's wild parrots, where they're suffering neurological damage from it. So None of these poisons are good, but my focus is going to be on the anticoagulants today because those are the poisons we have a lot of data for and the harm that they're doing to wildlife. Just one thing, the second generation, first generation anticoagulant thing, the second generation are just newer poisons. They're marketed as one feeding kills. So just one feeding is enough to kill a rodent. However, all of these anticoagulants work the same way by interfering with the blood clotting mechanism in the body. So they're all the same type of poison. Flaco was exposed to 2 second-generation anticoagulants and 2 first-generation. You can see the list: bromadiolone, difethiolone, difascinone, chlorfascinone. As our previous presenters already spoke of, he also had an avian herpesvirus. However, he had no broken bones when he collided with the building. He was in good body condition and suffered from an internal hemorrhage, which is often a sign of anticoagulant poisoning. So even if these rodenticides were not the ultimate cause of his death, he may have been experiencing what we call sublethal impacts from anticoagulants. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those. So first, how they work. This is just a quick graphic. The rat or the other animal eats the bait. It makes the rat thirsty. It starts to bleed internally. The weakened rat seeks water. And then because it's so sick and weaving and disoriented, it can become a very easy target for a predator, wildlife predator. And then that predator can also die of internal bleeding or other injuries and effects, or drown trying to cure its thirst, which is what happened in my neighborhood in Berkeley, actually. 2 Cooper's hawks were found in my neighbor's little kid's swimming pool. And they had gone there after they were poisoned by eating poisoned rodents. Animals can also die from eating the bait directly. So some of the sublethal health impacts, this is from a literature review we've done. We have a white paper on our website. They can cause hemorrhaging beneath the skin, extensive bruising, hemorrhaging in bones, the body wall, heart, and elsewhere in the body, possible heart failure, hemorrhaging of the heart, liver, kidney, lungs, intestines, and muscles. And then they become increasingly vulnerable to other causes of death, such as vehicle collisions and predation. They can cause chronic anemia, making animals more susceptible to other diseases. They can have a lack of appetite, decreased body weight. In mammals, there's neonatal transfer to young kits, and then they can also cause decreased resilience to environmental stressors. Fetuses are more susceptible to verdificum, that's one of the second generations, than adults. So there's widespread impacts that, again, if they don't kill an animal outright, they can make our wildlife very sick and weak. In contrast, one red-shouldered hawk can kill 30 rodents in a month. These are our non-toxic natural pest controllers. One study compared barn owls raised in fields treated with anticoagulants against those in a non-treated site. They found that there were shorter culmen and tarsus length in nestlings in the treated fields, shorter wings and tails in treated fields, and one nestling's primary feathers were malformed, rendering it flightless. That is not this owl. This is just a nice young fledgling barn owl, by the way. A study by Vias found that ferruginous hawks will prey preferentially on poisoned animals. So again, we know that for predatory wildlife, if they see a sickened rodent, that's going to become an easier prey for them. A 2022 study by Vias with USGS also found sublethal effects from chlorfascinone, one of the first-gen anticoagulants. Red-tailed hawks were less able to regulate their own internal body temperature. Lemus in 2011 found increased parasite and pathogen burdens in great bustards in Europe in fields that had been treated with a first-generation anticoagulant. And then just some following slides, I want to give a warning that some of them are rather disturbing. And I also want to thank you to all the rehabbers that may be here today, because you're doing the really hard work of seeing these animals and trying to help them. So I want to thank you and give you a shout out. And also thank you to the wonderful photographers that let us use their photos. So this was a great horned owl in San Luis Obispo. It had a minor wound that bled out. It turned out that this owl was positive for several anticoagulants. It left behind 2 fledglings. The mate disappeared. The fledglings had to go to rehab. And again, you know, poor Flaco is far from the only victim here. We have many owls that are perishing from these poisons. Barry was another owl in Central Park that was killed by a truck, had potentially lethal levels of rat poison in her system that could have impaired her flying ability and ability to dodge vehicles. Another photos from a dying barred owl in the Northeast. A fledgling turkey vulture collapsed on a patio in El Cerrito in the San Francisco Bay Area, taken to rehab and died the next morning, positive for multiple anticoagulants. The neighborhood had been watching this family, which is pretty unusual to have a turkey vulture family in an urban setting, and they had been watching and rooting for this little guy to survive. So it was tragic for not just the vulture family, but also the neighborhood and the people that had been watching this nest. This is what happens with rodenticides. Animals bleed out from the nares and the bill or the vent. This is a sickened red-tailed hawk in the Northeast. You can see the blood on the bottom of the wings. A very sick great horned owl in rehab. And then this was a great horned owl found in a dumpster in Stern Grove in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. It was a very, very sick owl, and there's so many things wrong with its picture. I don't even know where to begin, from our plastic trash to just someone putting an owl in a dumpster. But the body was retrieved and necropsy was done. The owl had many, many health issues, but it most speakingly to me, it had an extensive hemorrhage in its body cavity, and it was found with 2 different anticoagulants in its liver. Eagles are being greatly affected. Bald eagles, people think that they only eat fish, but they're actually opportunists, which most raptors are. They'll eat what's available, and so they see a sickened rodent, become poisoned, secondarily poisoned. Oftentimes they don't make it. A recent study found by the University of Georgia found that over 80% of bald eagles and golden eagles in the US studied were exposed to anticoagulants. That's really a horrifically high figure. And then there can be cumulative impacts. So, one anticoagulant added on top of 3 or 4 others just increases that dose of blood thinning poison. And another study by Ratner found that once a raptor is exposed to one of these poisons, it can become increasingly vulnerable to added exposure. And this is a lovely American kestrel. We wonder why they're disappearing. Insecticides and rodenticides are undoubtedly taking a big toll on these lovely pint-sized predators, as Kate Davis calls them, pint-sized predators. I love that. A study of northern spotted owls, a threatened species, found that 70% tested positive for anticoagulants. In that same study, 40% of barred owls tested positive. And then a study by the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory in 2018 found that 8% of young red-tailed hawks, just 2 to 5 months out of the nest, carried detectable levels of anticoagulants. It may not sound like a huge percent, but when you think that they're only a few months out of the nest, that's actually pretty high and pretty frightening. We have new studies from Europe that show that anticoagulants are being found in fish, including rainbow trout and river otters. And we've seen river otters exposed in California as well. So we know that these poisons are infiltrating the aquatic food web. And then just a point about, the companies that put out these poison bait boxes, which you see everywhere. It's a very lucrative and deadly cycle. So they come out, they put out poison, they walk away, they come back the next month, re-up the poison. But if you think about it, they're putting out bait. So they're attracting rodents in, and albeit it's poison bait, but it's still food for rodents who don't know that it's poison. So they come in, they poison the rodents, and then they walk away. And I've actually had pest control operators tell me, well, it's out of sight, out of mind. We just put the poison down and then we walk away. The problem is the out of sight, out of mind isn't out of sight, out of mind for wildlife predators. It's a very lucrative cycle. And honestly, I feel like it's a bit of a scam on the public. We've had raptors learn how to wait outside these poison bait boxes, wait for the rodents that eat the poisons to come out. This was a red-tailed hawk in San Francisco who learned to wait at a Safeway store for mice coming out of the poison bait boxes that they had outside there. So they're an attractive nuisance. And then there are studies that are showing that rodents poisoned with anticoagulants actually carry more disease to humans, the bacteria Leptospira and E. coli. So, there are all these concerns about rats and public health fears, et cetera, but the rodents that are poisoned actually carry more disease than ones that aren't. So we're kind of in this weird, vicious cycle that doesn't make any sense. So what are we doing about it? We're a small nonprofit. We're kind of lean and mean. So we have very targeted strategies. We build partnerships with many other groups. We do public education. We work on legislation and litigation when necessary. And we've employed all of those strategies to try to stop this problem. Our public education takes numerous forms, but these are some of the billboards we've done recently in agricultural areas in California. And I'll talk about why in a minute. So we filed a lawsuit in 2018 asking the state of California to reevaluate these poisons and their impacts on non-target wildlife. As a result of that lawsuit, that led to legislation that put a moratorium on first, second generation anticoagulants, and then the remaining first generation anticoagulants. So over the period of 4 years, we've had a series of 3 state bills passed. So now consumers cannot buy these products over the counter, nor can the pest control industry use them. And they're really where the problem lies at this point, but they can't use them unless there's a public health emergency. And I just want to say that despite a lot of information that's being spread by the industry, there have been no public health emergencies to date in our state. Unfortunately, our bills have had to exempt agriculture, and so hence we are targeting agricultural areas with our educational efforts. Again, how did these bills get passed? It took years of attempts at legislation. It took us 6 years to get our first bill passed. We built a coalition of over 80 groups, from raptors to mountain lion enthusiasts. And then all of our legislation was based on data that we had from California Fish and Wildlife showing the impacts of these poisons on wildlife. So it's very science-based. So these moratoriums are not permanent. They're temporary. They're tied to the reevaluation process by our State Department of Pesticide Regulation. This is just a screenshot of our initial lawsuit. And again, this is kind of what we base our efforts on, is the data that we get from our own state, which gives us a good snapshot of how many animals are being poisoned. There are efforts around the country to take action to do something similar. In Massachusetts, there's some great citizen-led groups that are working on home rule petitions that actually empower municipalities to ban anticoagulants. Some states can do that, others cannot. California is one that where cities can't ban what the state doesn't ban, but in Massachusetts they can do that, and there are a few other states that actually can do that. There's been some legislation proposed this year by Representative Jim Hawkins that will put all of the anticoagulants into a ban. Harvard Law has petitioned to suspend registration of anticoagulants. So I want to give a shout out to those groups that are doing amazing work. So Connecticut and Massachusetts both have bills in play similar to California's, and then groups are strategizing in New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Washington State, Florida, North Carolina, and New Jersey. So there's action that's spreading to many other states. British Columbia has a permanent moratorium on second-gen ARs, which I think is really wonderful. So my advice, if you want to do something about this, is to build a broad coalition. What you can do personally: don't use poison, help us spread the word. A lot of people still don't know. If you feed birds, clean up the drop bird seed at night. Rodents are going to come for food and water. Practice good housekeeping. Don't leave pet food out. Exclude rats from your chicken coops. Those spinning composters are way better at keeping rats out than just compost bins. Elevate your coop by 18 inches if possible. Use hardware cloth underneath it so rats can't get in the coop. Exclude rodents from your home. Many pest control companies are actually starting to specialize in exclusion. So you can find those ones that will do that. There's a really good business in this. It costs a little more upfront, but over the long term, it's much more cost effective than having a company could come out and put out poison month after month. Don't use snap traps or electronic traps out in open spaces where other animals can get into them. They're taking a toll on songbirds, so they can only be used in enclosed spaces. And never ever use those inhumane glue traps. They are absolutely terrible. Rip out ivy. It's a luxury hotel for rats. They love hiding in it. Gives them everything they need. And then again, organize at the local level, the state level, and work to get better state laws passed. We have a lot of resources on our website, including an activist toolkit. We have posters that you can download and print out. We also ship these posters anywhere in the US and sometimes overseas as well. So we have tips for different problems, like in your barn. We even worked with a pest control company to come up with tips for rodents getting into restaurants, in your car. And then I just want to mention, I think David and Jacqueline mentioned that there's Flaco's law that will require 2 pilot projects with rodent fertility control. I think that's a great idea, and fertility control shows great promise. Loretta Mayer, who co-inventor of ContraPest, she's leading the way with a new product called Good Bites. I think she might be in the audience today, so if you have questions about exactly how rodent fertility control works, she can answer them. I think that's a great step. I don't think it's going to solve the problem of secondary poisoning until we also stop using anticoagulants. And I just want to end on a quote from Rachel Carson that we must decide whether we wish to continue on our present road, and we can only do so when we're in full possession of the facts. And I think we now know what these poisons do, and it's time to take action. So again, thank you for all the photographers that have contributed, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Lisa, for showing that. And I really am thankful that you joined this webinar panel to present, because I feel like so many people followed Flaco. He meant so much to different people in different ways, and the world knew about him. He died. It was tragic, but let's take it one step further and make his life count. And I feel like you're bringing us the information that the world needs to know to help make his life really count. And I know there's a lot of people here who are interested in that information. And if you haven't been on the Raptors Are the Solution website, absolutely go there. There is so much information there. It's all the latest research is in there, how to do things yourself. As she said, the posters, you even have posters is that the rat poison is wildlife poison, translated into different languages for around the world. It's a phenomenal resource. So thank you. I mean, yes, it's not happy information, but it's the kind of stuff that makes people go, I want to do something. And that's what's important. And I know there's a lot of people here that do want to do something. We're going to go into the Q&A period now. Joe is joining us back. Joe, do you want to jump in first with a question? Are you ready for that?
Yep. The first question, I think, is probably just the simplest. Someone wants to know, how did he get his name? And whoever can answer that.
We don't actually know. Flaco is Spanish for skinny. And as you could see in the photos of him, he certainly was not skinny. And somebody actually joked that his true name should be Gordo, given how fluffy he was. But it seems like he had that name from birth or from hatching in North Carolina.
And I should mention too that you've tried to dig into some of the early information about him, but much of the information is not being shared. It's only what's publicly available that you've been able to find. But I think you've dug as much as can be dug to get information about his background.
Yes, that's right.
That's correct.
Here's a basic one that you sort of touched on a bit. How did you track him and spot him so often in Central Park? Because it's huge.
Should I take that?
Yeah.
Well, in many cases, his location was known because he would frequently return to the same roost during his rescue. The rescue efforts, his locations were known. But other than that, I think just having a lot of experience watching owls and other wildlife, having just kind of through that experience a sense. In some ways, it's kind of be hard to describe, but knowing where to look, I suppose it's kind of understanding their habitats, understanding where they like to hunt, knowing where the rats are in Central Park. I have to admit that we know pretty well where the rats are in Central Park. So just checking those places, having really good optics. We have very good binoculars, as well as we use thermal binoculars. So heat detection, which is really handy for finding a nocturnal bird. Want to emphasize that or make clear that we were able to find these ways without using any sort of artificial illumination. So we didn't use flashlights, and we also didn't use playback to attract him. So we didn't want to confuse him to think that there were other Eurasian eagle owls around. So we just kind of, use the least impactful techniques we possibly could. And the book is about finding Flaco. The truth is there are many times we could not find him, right? And that was all part of the adventure for us, is to try to find him, and we with the expectation that sometimes it just wouldn't work out, and we'd try again the next day, next night.
And he hooted a lot, and he hooted loudly. So we, as much as we relied on optics and our vision, we also relied on our ears. And that was also made it sometimes easier for us to find him.
Jackie's a really good spotter. So tip number one is to find a girlfriend who's a really good spotter, or find a significant other who's a really good spotter. That will get you ahead right away. Yeah, and actually, in finding him in the Upper West Side was really based on his hooting. We drove what we like to call a hoot route. After dinner, we'd hop in the car. And sometimes it was very cold, so it was nice to be in the car to do this and just drive around to all the different buildings he'd been heard hooting at and listen for him, and that often worked. More times than not, that worked.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, we got a broader and broader map of his different locations, just that way.
If someone finds a dead raptor with no obvious cause of death, is it expensive to have it tested for rodenticides? And where would someone go to have that done?
In California, the Department of California Fish and Wildlife will have the bird tested, and they will actually send a cooler to you, a prepaid cooler, so you can turn the body into the state for testing. I imagine most states, it's probably pretty similar that you could turn the bodies into your state Fish and Wildlife. However, I know there are regulations too about picking up dead raptors now, especially with avian flu virus going around. So I would probably consult with your local rehab facility first, and it may be that they will be able to help you to go out and pick it up and then handle the testing with a state agency from there. That's kind of my best recommendation.
I think in Minnesota, we don't have that option, doesn't exist. And from what I understand, it's a fairly expensive test.
The tests are about $150. They're not cheap. And we can help subsidize that with people in California. If you find a raptor and the state runs out of money to test, which they sometimes do, but for the most part, they will always test.
Okay, another question for Lisa. What is the persistence and degradation of the chemicals, and how long do they last in the environment and in prey?
There's a scientist on this call that can probably talk to that better than I can, but my understanding is that the half-lives of the second gen can last for months. So those poisons can sit in the liver for quite a long time. The first gens go through the body faster, but I have been told by a scientist who's studied rodenticides in fishers that what happens is when the first gens go into the bloodstream, they cause this initial pulse. And so if you've got like a second gen in the liver, and then you get the first gen going through the bloodstream, that you're essentially dealing with like this, cataclysmic effect of ARs in the body. So we know the half-lives are very long for the second gen. The first gen, again, not as long, but it's also the first gener that associated with immune system impacts like mange in bobcats, mountain lions, foxes, coyotes, etc. So they each have their own evils. And again, while the second gen, we know they last longer, the first gen cause a different suite of problems.
Someone asks, as an educator, how do I address with the public that even though Flaco did survive for a year, that doesn't mean that it's appropriate to free all the animals in captivity. We have many raptors that are non-releasable due to being overly socialized or illegally raised as pets, and we've had this question quite frequently since Flaco. So whoever wants to answer that one.
I mean, I guess.
Should we
I
start?
can-
Or... Go ahead.
Go
Carla.
ahead. Well, I mean, we have owls in captivity also, so that's something we think about also. And for us, I mean, it's very much about security and security cameras. And as we build our new center, you know, perimeter security, because this is happening in other places all around the country and around the world. And some people simply don't understand. And I don't know how you reach those people and say, you know, this isn't necessarily a good thing. And even though Flaco did live for a year, we're talking this is a non-native apex predator. And thankfully for the environment, he was eating non-native prey. He was eating non-native pigeons and non-native Norway rats. You know, if he was in a different location, could he have had an impact on the environment in other ways? But, you know, I don't know how you reach everybody that has the idea, you know, and some people just honestly believe no animal should be in captivity at all. And I don't know that you're going to be able to change those views. David, did you have some things you want to say?
Oh, I think I would just add that we celebrate Flaco because of what he was able to accomplish in the face of adversity, that he, you know, survived, overcame all these challenges, and, you know, people really connected with him because he was able to do that against the odds. He was the underdog. And definitely agree that it's, you know, we celebrate him, but we don't celebrate the vandal who released him. Again, Jackie said this, but we don't know what the motive of the vandal was. I think people assume that it was to free Flaco, but in the weeks preceding Flaco's release, you know, somebody was caught stealing animals from the Dallas Zoo to keep as pets, I suppose. So, you know, there are a range of other, you know, regardless, releasing him certainly endangered him and is not something we, you know, at all applaud. But there are a range of other motives that are very objectionable, right? To anybody that, you know, possibly somebody was trying to steal him or just playing a prank and could care less about his welfare. You know, New York City is a big city, and any number of, you know, motives come to mind. And it's miraculous, actually, that he didn't die immediately. You know, he had to cross without really any flight skills. He had to cross Fifth Avenue with all his traffic, and then he was on a sidewalk, you know, tired and afraid. He could have, you know, been pounced on by an off-leash dog or you know, some other thing could have happened. And it's quite lucky that he survived and got to the point where he, you know, was able to fend for himself.
Mm-hmm. And then this question plays right into that. Is there still an ongoing investigation to find the vandals that set him free?
I think the case may still be open, but really the public, we know nothing about that investigation, how much they know, how much surveillance footage they have, anything like that. We really don't know if they'll ever catch the person. You know, going back to the motive, nobody's ever come forth and said, you know, even anonymously, that they released Flaco, which you might expect to happen if it was politically motivated. That is, you know, somebody who you know, was looking to free a zoo animal. So really it remains quite a big mystery.
We have a question from Marjon. They say, I noticed that you are a classically trained musician who became involved in earbirding. I'm wondering about what types of training you had prior to being able to identify and replicate owl calls. I'm considering this path of study in the future and would like to know how you broke into that field.
Oh, well, it just happened. Like Carla said, I became... So yes, I'm a classically trained musician. I used to play the recorder and a bit of harpsichord. So I did study this at a professional level. And I had to give up that job due to health issues. But I always loved nature, so I've always been outside in nature. And I love sound, and I found Carla Bloom's Carla's website on great horned owls. And that's where I discovered that I was pretty good at hearing all kind of subtle differences in owl calls. And my training was basically waking up in the morning, making my coffee, starting the computer and watch Carla's owls and take notes of everything that was going on there. So basically just listening and practicing. And then I went into learning how to read spectrograms. So if you should ever want to go that way, learn reading spectrograms, because that's the sheet music of nature, basically. And then I started recording, and I am not always doing ear work. I also have little recorders out in the field that do the work for me. So I hope that answers it a little bit. Just practice.
Here's a question for Lisa. What do you think of the fairly new rodenticide Ratcher? I believe it's supposed to be safer up the food chain.
Honestly, I haven't heard of it. There are a lot of new things that come out. So I would look at the active ingredients and see what's in it, and see, we have the active ingredients in the 1st and 2nd gen ARs on our website. So you can go there, we have a guide to that, and just always look at the active ingredients, because a lot of weird claims are coming out about newer and safer. And for the most part, I haven't seen anything that really is.
How did Flaco and the snowy owl get along?
Oh, I wasn't clear about that. So they were in the park at different times. The snowy owl was in the park in early in 2021. So that was way before Flaco's time. But again, as David mentioned earlier, one of the ways that we would find Flaco in the park was to check trees that we knew were favored among other owls. So they loved that particular tree at the compost area. Flaco was in the park at the same time as our resident great horned owl, Gerald. The two of them coexisted for many, many months. We know of at least one time when they were roosting very close to one another in the loch, and they were peaceful. So,
And they could probably see each other, but we knew they could definitely hear each other, because one evening Flaco started hooting, went over to Gerald, could hear Flaco very clearly. Gerald was asleep, didn't care. And people are sometimes surprised by that, but we actually, see it regularly. I wouldn't say often, because owls are still rarities in Central Park, but Central Park is very food abundant. Those who haven't visited, tons of rats, really tons of rats. It got much worse after COVID. And so there just isn't competition for prey. And none of these owls, actually for the past couple of decades, we haven't had owls breeding in Central Park. So they wouldn't have the, defensive inclinations perhaps that breeding owls would. I'd be more worried about the owls being attacked by red-tailed hawks.
mm-hmm.
We have, several breeding pairs of red-tailed hawks in Central Park, and they can be very territorial and aggressive. And we've seen, the hawks attack the owls. But yeah, Flaco was very, very similar to the snowy owl in terms of behaviors. Snowy owl also liked the baseball fields, perching on the backstops and on the baseball fields themselves. That owl we discovered was roosting on rooftops in Harlem, right above Central Park, right north of Central Park. So also like buildings,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think they're close cousins, but they're certainly cousins in terms of species. So it's perhaps not surprising that they exhibited similar behaviors that way.
Okay. There's going to be a smile for this one. When is there going to be a film about the story of Flaco, whether a documentary or a feature film?
Well, I'm wondering if she's still on the call. There's a documentary filmmaker, Penny Lane, and she's here.
She's texting us to say that she's still on the
Yes.
call.
So she's been working on a documentary on Flaco. We can't wait to see it. So stay tuned.
Kind of relating to the previous question, what Central Park bird should we follow now after Flaco, snowy berry, pale male, hot duck?
Well, when certain birds, I think, capture the imagination in New York, they can potentially become city, state, national, and international news stories. And I think that's just part of living in New York and being in New York. And naturally, the ones that become celebrities that way are the ones that stay in Central Park and like it there, right? Who are comfortable with, to the extent they can be. You can never tell, right? You can't ask the animal if they're comfortable, but they're comfortable with the attention that they receive. And I think it's not surprising New Yorkers take to these animals because they're not accustomed to seeing that kind of nature. It actually is all around us. Central Park, other large parks in New York City, there's probably a few dozen mating pairs of great horned owls throughout New York City, throughout the 5 boroughs. And these celebrity birds, as they're sometimes called, are gateways. We other people have gotten into birding and appreciation of wildlife and also supporting conservation causes because a celebrity bird got us hooked. And I think, we know a number of conservationists in New York, active in New York City, who, appreciate that dynamic, that there are these entry points for people to appreciate the nature around them. But
And want to protect it.
Yeah. I'm sure there'll be another celebrity bird coming along soon.
Is it my turn for a question? Is there a reversal for anticoagulant rodenticides? So say if a pet eats it.
Yes. So if a pet gets into anticoagulants, they can be given vitamin K therapy to help the blood start clotting again. That's also what rehabbers do. If you can get injured wildlife to a rehabber quick enough, they can start that therapy. Doesn't always work. It takes a long time and it's very expensive and costly and stressful to the animal. So, but if you do find a bird that has been poisoned by anticoagulants or other wildlife, you can take it to a rehab facility or your vet. So there is an antidote. It's just a matter of time getting it there quickly enough and hopefully succeeding with the therapy.
I'm going to fold a couple of questions into one. How long have you two been tracking wildlife in the city? And what's the closest you got to Flaco? And how did he react to your presence or the presence of other photographers?
So I'll start. I began birding in 2019 and quickly got into wildlife photography. I wanted to share with others what, all the cool stuff I was seeing in Central Park and beyond. And we actually met following Barry, the barred owl in Central Park. We developed a sort of ritual nightly routine of going to see Barry fly out. And that was a lot of fun. David, do you want to answer your part and then we can get the second question?
So I started birding in 2018. Had always wanted to go on a safari in Africa and finally did it. And it was a life-changing, amazing experience to go on safari. I learned on safari that I wanted to do more of that, whether it was safari or something closer to home. And I also learned that I was not very good at spotting the animals. So when I got home to New York, I thought to myself, I need to practice. I can't go on another safari in Africa without being better at spotting. And birding was a natural thing to take up since there's so much birding to do in New York. And then I got hooked.
And to answer the second question, Flaco, as we've said, was comfortable around humans, although he did have a limit. He did have boundaries. He didn't like to be approached. He didn't like flashlights. So when he was hunting in the construction site, there was a security guard who would be making his rounds, doing his job, checking to make sure that, nothing was happening in the construction site. But he carried a flashlight, and when he would get close to Flaco, Flaco would flush. He did not like flashlights ever. We never used flashlights around him, just to be clear, but he got comfortable with us. I do think that over time, he did come to recognize us. He knew we were not a threat. And there was one night in particular where we were standing at a ball field photographing him from behind a fence, and he approached us. He was hunting. He was aware of our presence, but he wasn't focusing on us at all. He was actively hunting. What he would do, even after he became a really skilled hunter, really skilled at diving down and catching a rodent, he would still often stay on the ground, and he would position himself so that he would trap the rats up against fences. And so he was in the process of doing that and came within just feet of us, really. Again, we were behind a fence, but that was a memorable experience because of the proximity. And then the last night that we saw him, David showed the photo. He perched on a chimney cover above us, and that was at that point one of the closest that we had ever been to him. And his hoot was so loud. It was the loudest we had ever heard, because we were, I don't know, on Paul's roof, something like 20 stories up. And so the ambient city noise was not an issue as it was when we were looking at him at other times. And it was just so loud and so beautiful. It was music to our ears, and it was a moment I'll never forget.
Yeah, and I just add that we never saw any signs that he'd been imprinted.
No.
We wondered if he was imprinted, but he never exhibited any signs of that. In fact, he was very hard to catch. So, perhaps the opposite. And then in addition to that, we were reassured actually that he flushed, right?
Mhm.
That if somebody accidentally
Got too close.
walked past him or whatever, usually accidentally, but sometimes somebody, was going in for a look and got too close, or a flashlight, something like that, he would fly off. And that gave us comfort that he, knew how to take care of himself.
And I think Marjon will agree with your observations. They learn who individuals are, and who that they can trust being around. I know Marjon has seen that, and other people who study owls have seen that too. I know in the Netherlands, the farmers who have little owl boxes, the little owls know the farmers, and they don't flush when the farmers come out. But if somebody comes over to check the box, they're out of there because they know, hey, that's a stranger. So owls do learn who individuals are and react differently to them.
Exactly. That's exactly my experience in the field, especially since I have been visiting these owls repeatedly every week for years. They know me, but once I take someone with me, they're gone.
Marjon, question for you. What software do you use to clean up your owl audio, and what do you use to generate spectrograms?
Oh, it depends on what I want. So there's this free program, Audacity. And in Audacity, you can clean up a whole lot of things. You can make sure that the noise is removed, or that audio goes louder or softer. And it's cool to read through spectrograms because, well, it's really cool to read through it. And I also use Kaleidoscope, and Kaleidoscope is a program, it's costly, but it's an awesome program that helps me to, how do you say that? Pull up all the eagle owl hoots in my data so I can analyze them. And you can also analyze them in Kaleidoscope. And then if I want really clean spectrograms that I need to look at, there's this old program called Spectrogram 16 that Carla brought my attention to years ago, which is awesome also. So Audacity, Kaleidoscope, Spectrogram. And Kaleidoscope also has a light version, so it's free. So you can play around with that, and you can download that also.
And I think you can't find Spectrogram 16 anywhere on the internet.
Nope.
We've just saved the install file as we've gotten new computers.
Yes,
really
I have
good.
it on at least 3 separate hard disks. Exactly. But there are many other programs by now that you can find.
This question is probably meant for Lisa. This is someone from Belize, and they have received barn owl chicks with leg deformities. Would that be something that rodenticides could have done? And whether or not any ideas where they could send samples for testing and what samples would be required for that?
Wow. Well, I mean, rodenticides could be one cause. There could be so many other causes, though. I would hate to say that is what did it. In Belize, I honestly don't know where they would send that. I'm sorry. Maybe somebody else in the audience might have some information. I would just say, look to see if there's a governmental agency that is, in charge of wildlife, and contact them.
And then do you know what kind of samples would be needed to test for?
For something like that? Well, I mean, often the liver is tested, but getting a full necropsy, on the whole body, is really important. So you can freeze the bodies and they can still test them. So I would recommend doing that, and then contacting whatever the overarching wildlife agency is for Belize. I don't know what that is.
Okay, this question is probably for David and Jackie. Are they still using rat poison in Central Park?
So the Central Park Conservancy has said that they do not use rodenticides during raptor mating season. But then they haven't exactly said whether they do or don't outside of raptor mating season. What we've seen is that, generally speaking, the Conservancy doesn't, because we don't see the bait stations, doesn't use rodenticides. And if there are any used, it's at a very, very low level compared to the rest of the, an ordinary city street. On an ordinary city street in, say, the Upper West Side, I'm sad to say, you will find a bait station at almost every tree. And some trees will have 2. And reality is, I think some of them are for show to, for somebody, for say a property manager or a super to say, I'm dealing with a rat problem, and they're probably empty. But if you assume that they're full, that's a lot of rodenticides on city streets, which is really a sad thing. But inside the park, it's a relative, oasis from that perspective. The eateries in Central Park, and there are a number of them, are allowed, of course, under health code to use rodenticides, and they have bait stations. I hope those are empty. It's really kind of it's really foolish for them to be using rodenticides, because they're not going to be able to kill just the rats around the restaurant. If they do, then more rats will come in. It's kind of a Sisyphean thing, right? It wouldn't make sense for them to waste money on that. But you do see the bait stations right outside the eateries. And that's why we were so concerned when Flaco left. And actually, Barry had been observed leaving the park too. Had been seen across the street at the Museum of Natural History by somebody, which we thought was pretty remarkable as urban birders, but also made us concerned too. And lo and behold, she had rodenticide poisoning as well. But as soon as Flaco left, that was an immediate concern of ours, that just hunting around in the city, he'd be at a much, much higher risk. So I hope that answered the question. We would, of course, be strong advocates for just eliminating rodenticides completely in Central Park. It seems like if they're used at a very low level, it'd be easy enough just to say that, just to have the view that they shouldn't be used at all. And in fact, we, of course, support eliminating rodenticides across the whole city and finding other means to deal with the rat problem.
That moves very nicely into the next question, actually. The state laws that Lisa had mentioned, are those protected from federal legislation?
So it's kind of complicated. It's different in different states. So in some states like ours, there's a state Department of Pesticide Regulation. There's something similar in New York. There's something, I don't know the names of all the state agencies, but in other states, the federal government, like the US EPA, essentially is regulating pesticide use. And in those states, I would say it's going to be a little harder, obviously, to get legislation passed or do something that can kind of take precedent over, what the federal law and the regulators are doing. But in other words, like in California, our state Department of Pesticide Regulation kind of stepped out ahead of the US EPA and took action before the EPA, for example, pulled the second gen off consumer shelves. So states can take stronger regulation that would be very hard for federal regulators to undo. We've tried kind of getting attention to this at the federal level, but have not succeeded. Really, we need a champion in Congress who will take on this issue and do a national moratorium or a national ban. So my hope is that there's someone there that will want to champion this cause. The assembly member that we worked with on legislation over the past 2 years is now in Congress, so it's possible. Maybe she'll be willing to take federal action. That would be incredible if she could. I'm worried about the. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay, I'm going to throw in a couple of questions or comments for the person from Belize that was asking about things. We had a rehabber mention that metabolic bone disease could cause the breaking of the legs. And Tristan from the Scottish Owl Center mentioned there's a Belize Raptor Center that might be it'd be worth getting in touch with Sarah over there. He had met, and she might be able to give some direction about where to look in Belize for help. And then a question. Did anyone, this is probably for Jackie and David, did anyone ever try to call Flaco as a mate or trap him using mate calls?
So during the 2-week attempt, the Wildlife Conservation Society did use callback one evening to see if they could lure Flaco to them so they could capture him. But what we observed was he was initially sort of listening to it a little bit, and then he just flew in the opposite direction. So
yeah, they provoked a hooting response. So he was hooting back to it, though he was hooting by then
before
every night anyway, as he, I guess, was establishing his territory. But yeah, he seemed a little bit wary of it. He wasn't flying towards it. He was flying away from it. Perhaps, and this was their last rescue attempt, there was just not enough time for him to get used to it and to get interested. And maybe that would only work with more, familiarization with the calls. I'm not sure. I've never, I don't have any experience with that.
Marjon has, I think she wants to weigh in.
Yes, because you did send me an audio file of Flaco and the playback that was being played. And that being said, so I did analysis on it, but it was a bit hard because there was a lot of ambient noise going on. But the playback that they were playing was absolutely not female. It was other male. And, but I could only see a little bit of the hoot. It resembled Flaco's hoot a lot. So I cannot say for sure it was his hoot, but it resembled it a lot. But a lot because of the ambient noise, I couldn't analyze everything. So
now, Marjon, your hoots are fantastic. And I'm sure Flaco would have loved you and have come right to you. But yes, that was tried once. I think they took note of how much he was hooting. beginning, the first week really, and then continuing into the second week, and tried it, but it didn't work. Yeah.
One commenter has studied neonicotinoids and their effect on wildlife. Have you seen any of that in raptors as well?
I don't know if that's a question for me, but I would say that we know that neonics can take a toll on songbirds. And so raptors that are eating songbirds could potentially be impacted. So I definitely think that's a concern. And plus, we don't want to wipe out our insect prey base for any birds.
Another one for you, Lisa. What's the most effective and expedient way to change legislation, since environmental protections aren't typically a big priority?
It's interesting. So I don't know where the question is coming from. In California, I started kind of very locally, building a local group and coalition, and then I started building coalitions with other groups in other cities. We went city by city to each city to ask them to A, stop using rodenticides, and B, ask stores to take them off the shelves. We had, I think it was like close to 100 cities agree to do all of that. So that was sort of like a local attempt that we spread around the state. And then because California is such a big state, we realized this is going to take forever. So we need more of a top-down approach. So I would say, like, find a sympathetic state legislator. If you're in the US, if you're in a state, you need someone that's really going to be not afraid to stand up to this industry, because they're fighting this tooth and nail. They really hate people trying to stop rodenticides. So just find a sympathetic legislator, build a coalition, get as many groups. We had groups in our coalition, people that were concerned about mountain lions, as I mentioned, raptors, water quality, just every type of environmental group, got involved in this issue in our state. And because it's really an ecosystem issue, it's an ecosystem-wide poison. And so I would say try to build a coalition, but even if you don't have a huge coalition, just, maybe get 3 or 4 groups together, go to your legislator, show them the studies. We have a lot of scientific studies on our website, although not all of them by far. And go and make your case and find someone, again, who's willing to be a champion for wildlife, and start there. Yeah, that's my best advice.
We've had several people chime in about places you can contact if you find owls or other birds that are injured or sick like this. New Jersey has a New Jersey Raptor Association, New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Carcasses will go to the New York State Wildlife Pathology Lab, and they will probably pick up birds with avian influenza concerns as well. There's a note that you can find a local rehabber at Animal Help Now's website, and we have on our website a list of rehabbers in each state, and we try to keep that up to date. I'll put that in the chat in Zoom. If somebody in YouTube wants to put that link into the chat there, that would be great as well. But I just wanted to touch on those. The actual question for Jackie and David is about how many hours a week did you spend tracking Flaco?
Before we answer that, we'll just add that in New York City, we have the Wild Bird Fund, which is the only facility of its kind in New York City. And they do wonderful work. We're big supporters. A portion of the proceeds of the book have already been donated to the Wild Bird Fund, and we'll continue to do that. But they do fantastic work, not only taking care of the birds who have been sickened by rodenticides or injured, building collisions. They commonly receive patients that have suffered from that. But they bring a lot of awareness to the general public about these problems, which I think is fantastic and very important. And then how much time did we? It fit nicely into our routines because we're not, we have day jobs, full-time jobs, and we would go for fly out, what we call it. The early evening, depending on time of year, it's a different time, of course, right, when sunset is, but watch Flaco wake up and then, try to track him as long as we could. But I think we had a nice balance actually. And we would spend time with other birds, take trips, usually to see other birds. But we counted, it was more than 150 different nights that we observed him. Those are the nights we found him. And there are plenty of nights we didn't. But it in some ways it just works so well for our routines. We were able to find him, at night without even having his roosting location, because we were familiar with where he was hunting. So if we had something, personal obligation, or we wanted to have dinner, we could go out after dinner and find him, which, was for us, it was a lot of fun and it was always an adventure to look for him.
Okay, we're kind of about at time now, but I want to ask this one because I'm sure a few people are wondering. So you have the hardcover copy of the book, and this is a thick, serious, beautiful book filled with gorgeous photos, very well researched. I mean, this is an excellent book that they've done, Finding Flaco. And somebody is wondering if there's an ebook version of it.
Not yet.
Not yet. We've thought about it, but not yet.
Okay. And just so folks are aware of where they can get it, we have some that are.
You should get it at the International Owl Center, of course.
They're en route right now. UPS has them. They're coming. You can order them on our website right now. You can either go to internationalowlcenter.org and go into our store from there, or owlcenterstore.org, whatever. I think Joe will put it in the chat in Zoom, and one of our moderators will put it in the chat in YouTube. They can get it on Amazon also, or can they get it directly from you too?
When they're buying it from Amazon, they're actually buying it from us. And depending on the option, we're either shipping it or Amazon is, but it's still our inventory. And the book is also available at the New York Historical Society, or the New York Historical, its new name. They're opening a Flaco exhibition at the end of the week, and they have our book in their store. So that's a great place to get it. They will also ship internationally. So if folks, in Europe want it, for instance, it's not an option on their website, but you can call them and they'll work something out with you, and perhaps you can do the same. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you.
That's exactly how we handle international orders, is have people contact us directly. And then we can work something out that way. International shipping is expensive, but it is doable. And then
and while you're in the store, to everybody who's listening, check out the sweatshirts, t-shirts, and all the other merch. We own a lot of those items ourselves.
As do Owl Center staff. We have a dangerous amount of owl things in person and online stores.
We do also already have one order for the book.
Yay!
Okay.
Thank
you. So you know, we'll ship them when they get here. So they should arrive this week, and as soon as we get them, then we'll start shipping them out the door. And David and Jackie have probably shipped so many books, they're seeing them when they close their eyes at night.
Pretty much.
And just a reminder too, everybody should go check out Raptors Are the Solution. Is it .org or .com? .org? Yes. Check out that website because the resources are phenomenal. I know we didn't get to quite all the questions, and there were a few more that had some questions directed for you, Lisa, and they can contact you through the website, correct?
Yeah, and you can just send me an email at raptorsarethesolution@gmail.com, and I'll respond to your questions.
Yeah, Lisa is a magnificent resource. And, again, this was a magnificent story. Flaco meant so many things to different people. There's so many different ways to look at what happened to him. He died. It was tragic. It basically was somewhat preventable. The rodenticide thing, that's human induced. We don't have to just say, oh yeah, we have to have rodenticides. No, we don't. There's other alternatives. We can do stuff about it. And that's kind of our goal at the Owl Center, is to empower people to make changes in their lives. And a whole bunch of you, I know, want to make legislative changes also. And that's what it takes, is a whole bunch of people being aware. Many people that come to the Owl Center have no clue about the prevalence of rodenticides in raptors. They think, oh, you know, maybe a few. No, I mean, these studies, I mean, Lisa showed the barred owls, that was 40%, spotted owls, 70%. That's horrible. Most of the studies I've seen are like 60 to 80% prevalence. Some of them have been 100%. This is a big issue, and all over the place, not just in New York City. I have some friends that banned owls in Saskatchewan, and there, if you're a farmer, they'll just give you all the free rodenticide you want, free. He had no idea that, why did he have very high turnover in his owls? And when he found out, he was horrified that he had been using this. He didn't realize the impact it could have. So we as individuals all have the power to make that difference in our lives and to tell other people. And Lisa is just a magnificent resource for that. And the book, Marjon and I have both read Finding Flaco. It's fantastic. It's very, very well presented, because it can be kind of a touchy subject based on, you know, what your feelings are and how you're approaching this. And they've handled that all very, very well. So thank you all for joining us for this. And huge thank you to David and Jackie and Marjon and Lisa for taking the time to put together these presentations just for this, and giving their time to share all this information with you. And thanks to everybody watching and learning, and especially to those of you that donated so that we could keep this free so everyone can learn. And it will be saved on our YouTube channel. So if you go to International Owl Center on YouTube, you'll find our page and you can find it there. We'll probably index it under our Virtual Owl Expert Speaker Series, or you'll be able to find it on our website under the Virtual Owl Expert Speaker Series. So with that, we'll let you get back to your days or nights, depending on what part of the world you are. And thanks for learning more about owls. See you later.
Thanks, Carla.